Are you considering divorce? Are you dealing with it now? Are you on the other side and not sure what comes next? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Divorce Do's and Don'ts Show with your host, Lisa C. Decker.
Welcome, everyone, to the show today. We're very happy to have you.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Decker, and it is my distinct pleasure to be here today. I am a certified divorced financial analyst and the CEO and founder of Divorce Money Matters and Divorce Town USA, the sponsor of this show. And I am excited to introduce you to my assistant, my executive assistant and co-host of this show, Marcella Creighton, who helps with all matters of the show on camera and off. And Marcella, why don't you tell us about our special guest today?
I can't wait. Thank you, Lisa. So this week, we are talking to Dr. Ted Klontz, whose credentials are so extensive, it would take us the entire show just to name them all. So I've decided to give you the Cliff Note version today. Ted Klontz, Ph.D., is the Associate Professor of Practice of Financial Psychology and Behavioral Finance at Creighton University's Heider College of Business. He's also the founder and CEO of Klontz Consulting Group and co-founder and director of the Financial Psychology Institute. He has a 40-plus year career in counseling, consulting, and advising that has included authoring, co-authoring, and or contributing to 6 financial psychology-related books. He is a published researcher, professional speaker, and trainer. Dr. Klontz is also a designer and facilitator of various workshops, a consultant to major entertainment management groups and the USA Defense Department, and has his own private practice. Dr. Klontz has served in expert roles as an advisor to congressional committees and is regularly quoted in national and international media, including a feature on the Oprah Winfrey Network. He has served as one of the founding executive officers of the National Financial Therapy Association and is co-founder of Your Mental Wealth, a direct-to-consumer personal finance brand. Wow, we are so honored to have you today. Welcome to the show, Dr. Klontz.
Thanks for the invitation. And I always say, if you've lived as long as I have, yours will be that long also.
Well, we think you're pretty special. And, just so you know, folks, we had to shorten that list down just so we could have time to talk with Dr. Klontz today, because there is so much more to this man who I am very grateful to. I have had the opportunity to participate in 3 workshops that literally changed my life. And I look to you as such a mentor. And it is so great to have you here today and share you with our audience and the world, because people need to know about this incredible work that you and your son are doing together with the financial psychology. So, we talk about people in divorce. Obviously, the show is about divorce. How do you suggest that people look at this from a therapeutic standpoint and a financial standpoint? And how do those intersect with your experience and the work that you do?
Well, 2 things. There's going to be an emotional aspect to the failure of a relationship. And to, have the button disconnected when you push it so that nothing happens, right? That you can have the emotions, but to not make decisions from that place. And that very often requires another party to help you have the emotional part and not have it affect in any kind of long distance way what actually happens. So I always encourage people to have somebody who can help them and respect this whole emotional side of it. The emotional side of us is about 7 years old, and we have that much wisdom. The problem is we have adult bodies, we have adult words, and we have adult power to do some irreparable damage in those moments. So to have somebody who's can carry that and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. And to trust them is, I would say, one of the key things. One of the worst things to do, at least these days, they don't have house buyers and house purchasers and sellers get together. You don't have to meet with each other. And there's a reason for that, because everybody's coming emotionally charged, especially the people selling the house. So, it's just good logic. The decision-making part of our brain, when anxiety gets to a certain level, gets shut off and we react. And, 20 minutes or 20 hours later, we're going, well, why did I say that? Why did I do that? That's not how I really feel. And so to understand that that's a normal thing is really important.
Absolutely. And getting the emotional support helps you to make sound decisions, because you really can't do that from an emotional standpoint. And many times certified divorce financial analysts like myself are brought in by whoever the client is initially working with, whether it's their therapist or their attorney, or both attorneys, to help with being the voice of reason, because people don't always make decisions that are in their best interest when they are, coming at this emotional standpoint. For instance, the house, they get emotionally attached to the house, and, it may not be in their best interest to stay in the house, to end up, house rich and cash poor. And so getting the right team to help you make those decisions is very important from the emotional standpoint.
I would also add that if there are children involved, that's another huge element. Like, what's in the best interest of the children? You may not, I laughed at my son when he was going to have his first child. I said, I'm not going to let this change my life one bit, right? And now his life is child-centered, right? And just because the two adults who may have created the family are dissolving, under ideal conditions, even if we don't get along very well, our major thing is, let's make sure the kids are okay. Let's make sure we act in the best interest of the children.
Absolutely. We agree with that here. We are members of the child-centered divorce movement, and it is most important. If you put the kids' needs first, then everything can follow. And also, they're not used as weapons and pawns in the divorce if you take care of those matters first. So
Absolutely.
Very much agree with you on that. So, when we get to this point where people have to make these decisions and they're really wrapped up in the emotions of it all, it's going to affect the financial issue. So how can someone help determine their predispositions for financial situations during stressful events like a divorce?
I go back to get some help who can help you see the big picture. Emotionally, like even physiologically, our vision gets very narrow and we miss the bigger picture. And it's like, don't try this on your own. It's one of those, don't try this at home kind of thing. And I know that nobody really plans on doing this, but to do your due diligence to make sure that the person that you are helping you manage this is somebody that's competent, that's experienced, that doesn't say, they're a rat and run their stuff out on your situation, but to be able to see the big picture. I just can't emphasize enough that it's not a do-it-yourself thing.
Is there a formula for determining like a particular predisposition that someone might have? How would they recognize that in themselves? Are there warning signs or something they should be looking for so they can go, oh, nope, I'm about to do something bad for me and my kid?
Well, first of all, to know that they're probably, this is probably one of the most emotional, dramatic and traumatic situations that they will ever experience, right? And to know that they're at high risk for that, and just assume that I'm probably, if I get warmed up and fired up, I'm probably not going to make good decisions. And I don't care who you are, how much you know. The part of the brain I'm talking about is 7 years old and is immune to what our neocortex is telling us we should do. I mean, there's a point in time when we get emotionally revved up enough, there's a trap door that closes between what we know we should do and what comes out of our mouth. And just to understand that. And the more we understand, it doesn't just happen. Our bodies begin telling us that, you know, we're reaching that 7.5 or greater in terms of emotional energy. Anything happening above a 7.5 on a 10 scale is nothing. It's not going to be good. Whatever it is, we will not make the best decision. And again, I think it's really important to have somebody to lay this out with, to work through it, to somebody to hear you. This is not about controlling all of this. It is about deciding where you decide to take it and share it and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you know, I as one who has worked with clients as advocates for one party only, now I typically work as a financial neutral for the couple, and therefore I have even less emotional charge in all of this as an objective observer doing analysis of their situation. I can tell you that sometimes people get locked into those decisions. Maybe a promise was made to them earlier in the beginnings of the divorce, only to find out that that promise couldn't be kept. It wasn't malice. It's just that the person who made the promise didn't realize that there wasn't enough money to do that, to go around that way. And, you know, people do get emotionally locked into that and just shut down. So we like to say, having the three-legged stool when you're going through divorce, at least the legal, emotional, and financial support should be the basis of your team. And then we add in the ancillary members. But I'd like to know more about this field of financial psychology that you are a pioneer in, and how you came to know this work and what you're doing with it now. I had the pleasure, as I said, of taking 3 of your workshops, and exquisite listening. I remember, you know, some of the exercises that we did talking about that reptilian brain and how it shuts down. And it's very, very interesting. And it's so really on the forefront of cutting edge here that a lot of people aren't even aware of it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So actually, my son and I created the field unintentionally. It came about, I was in my early 50s, and I kept doing the same thing over and over again financially. And I said, I said to my wife, there's something wrong with my thinking. I don't know what it is. I'm not stupid. I'm not dumb. I'm not sick. There's something else going on. And so I began exploring, like, why would a guy like me, who knows better, not do better, right? And that began, and the field didn't exist then. There was nothing, the first paper ever written on the field of financial psychology, we wrote in about the year 2000, right? And it was just a very personal thing, like, I know better, why can't I do better? Like, what's going on? And I knew that there must be something logical, you know, like, again, people who know better and don't do, there's nothing wrong with them, right? It's just something else is going on that's bypassing what they know. And that began the field of, well, it's got to be something with my thinking. What is my thinking? And so we began sort of like, well, what is money? And sort of breaking the taboo. I remember early on, I interviewed a lot of my friends, like, so how do you feel okay having more money than you actually need? And my wife kicked me under the table, and afterwards she said, it's impolite to ask people how much money they make. And I wasn't doing that. So first of all was to begin talking about it. And then I began like, well, why do people overeat when they know better? Or why do they drink too much when they know better? Like, maybe some of those same reasons. And actually what we found out is money is just one of those things that people do to take care of things that, you know, that are unsolved or unresolved or whatever, and money is seen as a way for me to take care of that. And so we began looking at, well, I wonder if the tools that we use in psychology, at the time I ran a treatment center, I wonder if we could use those same tools to help people change their money behavior. And lo and behold, that's what our first paper was. It's like we put together the elements of this program and we did a study, and it was robust enough to get published, a peer-reviewed study. So that was the first study done. And and when we started this out, we didn't realize it was a field. I mean, we didn't know that nobody else had really done anything about this. So it was really almost out of self, trying to figure out myself, right? Part of the big issue for me is I knew I should put money away for retirement, but I just couldn't do it. Like it made no sense. And I would promise my financial advisor I'd do that. I would actually write the check, but I wouldn't send it in. It was all sitting on my desk. And one day, a friend of mine in the middle of all this said, "What does retirement look like to you?" And I go, "Well, it means you quit." And he said, "No, what would it look like?" And then suddenly I'm picturing myself in Hawaii, sitting on the beach with the waves rolling in and out over my ankles. And I felt disgusted. Like I can't imagine wasting my life doing that. And then it struck me, this has all happened about 5 seconds. No wonder I'm not saving anything for retirement. What if I change my definition of retirement to if I retire, I can do what I want, when I want, where I want, with who I want, and I don't have to do the other stuff. And that began the whole thing. And we were sort of puttering along until 2008. And then everything fell apart. And suddenly people are, how do people get themselves in the position that 2008 put them? Like suddenly there's this interest, and I'll never forget the phone call. New York Times called, and this guy says, "How many of there are you who do this work?" And I said, "Well, I know 4. But by this afternoon, there'll be 400, and tomorrow there'll be 4,000. And like that's exactly what happened. People began to see the picture of money is just one more thing that people can use in a way that is self-destructive and self-defeating, like anything else. And the interventions that we've created to help them in those other things can work here. We can extrapolate them into this. And that's really what financial psychology is. We are now doing some studies. I mean, there's specific financial psychology studies being done, but not very many. It's a very new field. And I always say, follow the research in terms of a general direction of West, but don't assume that's the only trail, because we're just moving. It's brand new. So
how exciting.
I wanted to, oh, sorry, Lisa.
No,
I wanted to tell you, I actually was thinking of that connection. I'm currently reading this book by Dr. Klontz. It's called Money Mammoth. And there's a chapter in there about enabling children through money and with money, and how detrimental that can be for them in the future. And we were talking a little bit about that, how people do that sometimes in divorce, where you have one really fun parent that gives the kid everything they want, and then you have another parent that's struggling financially, and how that sometimes get used as weapons. And I really thought about that as I was reading through that chapter, of finding the balance between supporting children, but not enabling them the same way you would do with any addiction. And how you can really set them up for financial failure in the future. Excellent points.
Yeah, well, financial enabling is one of the 4 things that will knock down a person's ability to have a reasonable relationship with money. I have parents who go, "No, my kids, they don't live in the real world." And I said, "They live in their real world. You are the bank. And until the bank says no more loans, then what? They're not going to, the average kid is not going to go, you know what, I know mom wants to help me, I know dad wants to help me, but that's not in my long-term best life." I don't know a kid who does that. There are, and like maybe 1 out of 100 who understand that money is never free. There's always an obligation, even if neither party wants there to be an obligation. The obligation is felt, or the obligation is expected. So, yeah.
Well, you said, bank a loan from mom and dad. Usually it's more like a gift. They don't tend to pay those back. And as a reformed enabler, I can tell you that doesn't work. You're right, and it's something that we don't understand that we're doing. So it's wonderful to be able to have these conversations to help others to prevent that, because enabling doesn't help anyone. And
I don't know about you, but my parents didn't have to worry about enabling me financially. They couldn't if they wanted to.
Right.
And my father actually said, as I walked out the door at age 17, "Don't look back, there's nothing here." that we're saving it all for your sister, which I thought was a really interesting. But and I thought, okay, and that really helped me. Is like, there's nobody, I gotta figure out how to do this myself, and I think that that's an incredible gift.
I agree with you. I came from very modest means. As Larry Winget, I once heard the author Larry Winget say, we weren't dirt poor, but we were very dusty, and that shaped me. I knew that I had no one to fall back on, and I had to stand on my own 2 feet and make it work. And that's what it's done. And that did shape me into the person that I am today. I still see with working with a lot of people with their finances that, feel like, oh, I don't have to worry about it. I'll get this inheritance, or, this or that is coming. And they're different people than if they had to make decisions from a different standpoint.
The cool part about my life is I've been able to help people design things that are helpful. Money can be helpful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't like you don't give your kids anything because you don't want to enable them. I work with a group out of Seattle, and they're Microsoft people who entered at the beginning. So they're incredibly wealthy, and they have children. And what we put together was a plan where at a certain point in time, they get a pot of money. The parents say, here are our values. Here are the people who can help you fulfill those values if they're yours, but this money is yours. And then they sit back and see what happens with the money, right? And it's sort of an amazing thing. So it's almost a test, really. But people do with the money what they're going to do with the money, and then you decide what you want to do based on what you now know about them. There's another gentleman I work with, and his message to his kids is, I believe in entrepreneurship. Come to me with your idea. If I would feel good investing in your project, I might. And in other words, he's the source of capital. If they want to start a business, how much capital you want, and I become an equal partner. You run the business, but it's like 50-50 until we decide to do something different with that. So both of those, I think, are quite elegant ways of using the gift of being able to help our kids without crippling them. Right?
Yes, and there's quite a difference there. An inheritance can be a tremendous blessing. If I love the values that you talk about, passing that along with everything else here. But
I was going to bring that back to divorce, because so many times we find during the divorce process that somebody's financial situation will change. Sometimes for the better, but oftentimes for the worse, because you are taking a 2-income family and you are separating it now into 2 different homes and 2 separate incomes. But still a lot of the same responsibilities. And so understanding your mindset about money and understanding how to use it for you instead of getting stuck in those old emotions and those old mindset is so important. And I think that's why I love the most about the books I'm reading that you've written. Is really changing people's mindset, and it's like a mental and emotional shift in how you're looking at money. That just because you don't have what you did before, or maybe now you have more than you did before, that doesn't necessarily change your value system, and it doesn't mean that it still won't work for you and you still can't be successful. And I think that's where people going through divorce are going to benefit the most, in my humble opinion, from this strategy.
The other thing I see a lot is there's one party who's much more educated around how money works, and I mean that's the original agreement is, I'll take care of the money, you take care of this, right? And now if there's a split, it's like how do I do that? And that's something to recognize also, that I need to up my skill set in terms of what do I need to know, or who can I trust to help me do what I need to do with this. So.
And I think you need to have a combination of both of those, because even when you trust someone, you need to understand what what is being advised to you, and you want to be a part of that. I always tell people you want to be a proactive partner, not a passive participant.
Correct.
And this is just fascinating work that you're doing. A couple things that come to mind, financial literacy is such an important piece. We don't have a lot of that to this day being taught in schools, which just blows my mind. Such a basic skill that everyone needs in life to be able to handle their own bills and understand credit and all the things that revolve around making investments and wise choices and all of that. Even the basics, just how to write a check. Nobody even writes checks anymore. It's all done digitally, but kids don't know how to balance a checkbook and things. And the other piece, and I don't know what you're going to say to any of this, Ted, but I've been doing a lot of research about trauma. It's just a personal search for healing. And you and I've talked about that a little bit. What about the trauma of financial effects that have happened in families that still affects generations later? I've talked with people who their grandfather lost all of their money in the stock market in the Depression and committed suicide and left them destitute. And generations later, they're still angry about things. They're carrying the weight of that. Does that play into anything in the work that you do?
2 minutes.
Oh my goodness. We may have to continue this after the call and listen after the show. And listen, folks, if you're here live, we're going to keep talking. So stay with us. We just because the show ends, don't leave. You'll be able to talk to Dr. Klontz live.
So 2 things. One is financial literacy is highly overrated in terms of creating financial change. And that's something really important to understand. We're not going to fix this by giving people the right information.
Okay.
Because for the most part, everybody understands the basics. Don't spend more than you have. Save for the future. All of which, by the way, are absolutely the opposite of how our brain is structured. 87% of us are not savers, we're spenders, and we're sharers, and all that kind of stuff. 83%, I believe, they just don't think long term. They're, our brains are not organized to do that. And the part of the brain that's in control of that hasn't received an update in 150,000 years. So what can we do to hotwire the basic brain thing so we can do what we need to do in today's culture, right? So we know that the more difficult we make it to spend money, the less people will spend money. Right? So how much friction can we create between your money and your desire to spend it? And the more we can create, and the federal government knew that in 1930 when they said, we're going to take money out of your paycheck so you can save to pay your taxes. And no, you can't take it out. No, you can't touch it. And no, you don't get any interest on it. Right? I mean, they knew about human nature. Right? So that's about the literacy thing, and the research is pretty robust in terms of, it didn't work quite as well as we thought. Right? There's an emotional content to it, which speaks to your second point. We call those traumatic moments financial flashpoints, right? Now that was a term that I coined because I'm a student of World War II, and when they dropped the hydrogen or atomic bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, you can, to this day, see the imprint in concrete of the human form, right? So traumatic financial moments have that kind of lasting impact. And if that trauma is not transformed, it will be transferred into the generation.
Yes, love that.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, so where do we get this idea that I'm not trusting anybody, right? My wife and I, when I finally talked her into going to a financial planner, and she's sitting there, and the guy looks up and he said, "Where did I lose you?" And she said, "When I got in the car." I'm still back because my father told me never to trust anybody with my money, especially a man.
Oh, wow.
You're all con artists. And so he closed his book. Thankfully, he closed the book and said, "What do I need to do?" What else do you need to tell me? He was smart enough not to go, okay, so this is the next page. And you might say, is that trauma? It's like, well, that was a pretty lasting thing, and that had been a principle in her life from the point at which she heard it. And it's important to understand that trauma is not just negative, right? So here's a situation I know of. The sheriff came one Sunday morning. The kids are gathering all their stuff together. The policeman said, you've got 10 minutes to get whatever you need out of here. Mom's doing that, dad's doing that, the kids are doing that. Grandpa drives up. Here's the check. Right? And that had an impression on that young girl. She goes, well, the money will always show up. Now, we don't think that that's a traumatic event, but that's a pro-trauma event. Like, I don't have to worry about it because God will provide, the money will be there. And people use their religious teachings to reinforce that. Like, why do I have to worry about money? God takes care of the sparrows. Now, nobody ever mentions the lifespan of a sparrow is about 2.5 years, right? I mean, I'm being a little irreverent there, but it's like we just make stuff up to support the logic, what we perceive to be the logic of our behaviors. That's
Well,
trauma.
this is so fascinating. We could talk for days and days with you. You are an amazing man with an amazing mind, and talking about Mind Over Money is the other book that you have. We're going to continue this conversation for those folks who are lucky enough to be here live. But Marcella, do you want to wrap us up here real quick?
I'm going to wrap us up very quickly.
Okay.
Just want to let everyone know we'll skip the normal resources that we show at the end of the show. We'll let you know that our guest next week is actually our lovely host, Lisa Decker. I will be interviewing her on the subject of gray divorce. It's not always black and white when you're over 50. So we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. And hopefully we'll see you all then. Thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate having you here. As always, you make the show what it is. Have a great one.
Thank you.